He is a lifer in the sports production broadcasting world, CJ Bottitta. He's also a great guy, family man, father. He joins me here on the podcast today on to something, and I'm Bryan Fenley with Tennis Channel and USTA and Fox Sports Radio and other outlets where we're going to show you not just the worker bee angle of CJ, and he works for a variety of different networks, but he's also a family man. He's a father. We're going to go down that route as well. Really fascinating conversation, enlightening, inspiring, and empowering. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. All right, here's my chat with CJ. When he's not working an event, he's usually on an airplane. And if he's not on an airplane and he's not working an event, I guess he's here. He doesn't have a lot of free time. CJ Bottitta is with me, sports production veteran. He has worked for several different networks. He is, and he wouldn't say this, but I'm going to say this, a producer extraordinaire. And he joins me on the Honest Nothing podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a sports broadcaster of Tennis Channel, USTA, volleyball, and do other sports as well. And this is a place where, as CJ knows, we've had a lot of your colleagues on, and we're not so much reading the LinkedIn resume of your career and telling those stories. I'm sure we're going to do some of that, but there's the personal side as well. You're a father. You are a family man. I hope you are ready to go down that route because I am. CJ, thanks so much for being here.
I appreciate the invite.
So here you have a day off. And besides talking to me, what is next up on the agenda?
Well, I already did some errands this morning, and next on the agenda is mowing the lawn, reconnecting my irrigation system, and testing that out.
What is your way of mowing the lawn? What is your style? What is your method for getting that done?
Good question. Oh, wow, we're digging deep right away. So I actually try to alternate. Sometimes I go straight lines this way, and sometimes I go diagonal. I read a while ago that that's healthier for the lawn, so you don't create any ruts. So basically, I usually kind of go around the outside like you paint a room, kind of edge around the corners, and then start getting in the middle. It's sideways or diagonal typically.
How does the way in which you mow the lawn and the way you were describing it sort of fit in with the way you attack sports media, where you kind of hit on the outskirts of things and you get a general foundation of how things are supposed to go, and then you get right into the teeth of it and what you need to do?
Good segue. Yeah, I mean, it's I had never thought of it that way, but I guess the same thing. It's a lot of prep. Make sure you have enough gas. Make sure you have your protective eyewear. Make sure you have I have AirPods for a little bit of music. And then start digging into the details, take around the edges and start kind of crushing into the middle a little bit. And probably about the same pace. I attack the lawn like I would probably attack a show after I have everything once I'm already set, just minus the countdown, I guess.
What kind of music are you listening to?
It depends on the day. I actually, the first music I ever owned, and I grew up on Long Island, first music I ever owned was Charlie Daniels Band. It was a cassette. Someone will have to Google what that is. But so I've liked country music before I moved down to Atlanta and then now North Carolina. So sometimes it's Darius Rucker, who's great in concert. Sometimes I have one that's just rock ballads that I think are kind of the unsung hero of the, Poison had a couple of good ones. Whitesnake had a couple of good ones. Meatloaf. Yeah, Motley Crue have a couple of good ballads, or like I said, kind of not the hard driving stuff, but just the deeper ones. Yeah.
When you go to a concert, what do you act like when you're there? Are you sort of in the back sitting in a chair? Are you up front? What is the mentality and behavior of one CJ Bottitta when you're at a concert?
I guess that all depends on who I'm with. The last couple of I'm not a huge concert goer. The last year we hit Darius Rucker up in New York at the Beacon, which was really awesome. It happened to be a weekend that my wife and I just went up there post-Olympic just to get away. And that weekend was based around Music Man Saturday matinee. Looked around in the area. Suddenly Darius Rucker's playing the Beacon Friday night. So that was a great weekend. Hit Tim McGraw down here in North Carolina at Coastal Credit Amphitheater, which was awesome with myself, my wife, and my neighbors. And then we had Billy Joel in Charlotte, my birthday weekend, which I wasn't supposed to be home originally. Had a show get canceled. Got 4 tickets fairly inexpensively, drove 2 hours with the family and hit Billy Joel. Billy Joel, I probably did not sit down much. Again, Long Island kid, so I think that's a rule. My kids blow me away because they know more Billy Joel lyrics than I thought they might. And I think it's just through osmosis because it's always probably around. Because in the car rides, everyone's plugged in, listening to their own stuff, but somehow, I guess my music somehow overrides theirs, I guess, a little bit. But no, those are the three. And I think typically I'm not a stand on my seat guy, but I'm definitely a stand up person.
You're not the person that everybody's holding up and moving around, where
Uh,
everybody's holding you and moving you around like you're crowd surfing. I couldn't
Not
picture
yet.
CJ
Not
Bottitta
yeah.
doing
Not,
that.
yeah. Not yet. But I will tell you, we've got bare naked ladies at Red Hat, this Red Hat amphitheater, July 4th. So yeah, I'll let you know.
I expect to see some video of that. How do you appreciate music? Is it the lyrics? Is it the beat? What captures your attention? What makes something sound good to you?
You know, for me, a lot of it is the ballads of the lyrics, which I always love country music because I think they tell kind of a really good story. And some of them, it's amazing to me how songs have more meaning to me, at least after kids. There's a song by Lone Star, talks about kind of the story is basically a father away from his family in a hotel room. That thing talked me to tears. Like after I had kids, that song just gets me teary eyed right away. So I think those are good stories. Other than that, it's a lot of it is kind of the driving hard stuff. Depends on the mood. But if I feel like I'm away from home, especially Olympics are kind of tough sometimes when you're multiple weeks. I mean, I love them, but it's also tough. So if I'm in the mood for a good cry, country music ballads usually take me there pretty quickly.
What is your way when you're on the road working Olympics or other
Mm-hmm.
events, your way of checking in with your kids?
With Olympics, it kind of depends on the timing, right? So we have a couple Olympics in a row that were the time zone was, crazy. Your Sochi back in 14, and then, most recently, Tokyo, Beijing. So, now that they're older, it could be just texts. When they were younger, it was figuring out like their bedtime early enough where they're awake enough, but not too late where suddenly now I'm the one keeping them up because that doesn't go well with the wife. But now that they're older, it's more split up kind of wherever I can, and they're more aware of that time zone. Olympics in Rio, frankly, were easy. Rio was 1 hour ahead. That was the most normal Olympics I've had in a while. I'm usually part of the at-home crew, which NBC does a great job with, and I love because it's RDU to JFK in a car ride as opposed to customs and heaven knows what.
CJ Bottitta is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. Besides communicating with your kids when you are working on an event, a live broadcast, getting it all set up, or even during it, when do your kids come to mind?
Uh, I mean, constantly is probably the right answer because that's one of the reasons I'm there, right?
Yeah.
Neither one of my kids, my daughter is a junior at NC State, my son's a freshman at UNC. House divided, but home very much united. Um, but I mean, they're the reason I do this, right? I mean, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I really appreciate the network of friends and second family that I have. But to me, it's the first family is the reason kind of why I do this. I provide. If I could, there's an upside and downside. I mean, a lot of my coworkers and colleagues and friends have been on this saying the same thing. It's you miss weddings and birthdays, and I sort of tried to make a rule for myself that I would never miss a birthday. I've taken red eye back from and had a hellacious day just to be there for the 3-year-old eating a cake kind of thing. So it's but it takes a toll, but it also gives us an advantage of basically having the kids see the world sometimes through our eyes. I've had the benefit of traveling to places that I never thought I'd travel to growing up on Long Island,
Mm.
whether it be Australia, Japan multiple times. We did a track meet in Moscow when I was working for TBS that, especially now, given the, political situation of the world, it's one of my favorite pictures I have is me leaning against the timing and scoring. At the end, it says, goodbye Moscow. And it's like just me and that sign. So that's the kind of stuff that, I try to tell the kids stories. My son's a little more interested in it than my daughter. Um, they've been in the production truck a couple of times too, just to kind of see, hey, when dad's away, he's not just watching sports. This is actually hard work. So yeah, that's I think of them pretty constantly.
How does being a dad, being a father, how has that impacted you as a producer in television and looking at that job differently?
Um, I think perspective. I think realizing that everybody is somebody's son or daughter as well.
Yeah.
I think, I would like to think I would be this way even without children, but I think when you grow up, you want to try to mentor people coming in. I was very fortunate to go into, when I was an intern coming out of Marist College, interned at ABC with some people that are now, leaders in a lot of areas, NFL, NWSL, Major League Baseball, some really integral people in my career, and they gave back. And that's what I try to do, whether the staff jobs, like you said earlier, that I've always either tried to be part of or initiate a internship program, or just trying to, instead of just barking orders, which is really not the culture anymore, you try to teach.
Yeah.
So that's, I'd like to think I'm more compassionate and understanding and a little balanced. I think I'm a better producer now than I was 10 or even 15 years ago. Hopefully I'll be even a better one 10 years from now. And I think the same thing about being a father. I've said this to my daughter several times, I've never been the father of a 21-year-old girl. So I'm not always going to get it right. And next year, it was my first time being the father of a 22-year-old girl. So you sort of feel your way a little bit. And with more reps, ideally, you handle the situations better, is the parallel, I guess.
When are you hardest on yourself? Because it sounds like obviously you're open and saying, okay, this is a new chapter for me. I'm learning on the fly as a father, like anybody would be. There's no perfect manual to set this up. But the way in which you're able to, I guess, evaluate yourself, what is your way of doing that as a dad, but also as a producer?
Producer one's probably easy. The question was, when am I hardest on myself? I'll use the word constantly again. I've never done a perfect show. In the beginning, you sort of, Bryan, you sort of, I feel like you sort of focus on sequences in the beginning. Like, hey, that was a really good sequence. Like we had the right graphic and the right replay sequence and the right follow-up camera shot, and we told a good story there. I think that's what a lot of this is connecting the dots of stories and storytelling. The different sports allow you to do it differently. Soccer with a running clock doesn't give you a lot of time to go back and tell those stories. You have to find sort of different ways. Maybe it's a very passive drop down from the bug as opposed to a full-blown, replay package, or a full screen score that you want to, you're not just going to lob that in over a corner kick, right? Where basketball and football, you have those natural breaks. And it's interesting now because as sports evolve, almost every sport I'm involved with is trying to find a way to make that a little bit more compact for the viewers. Curling for the Olympics might go from 10 ends to 8 ends simply because they're finding, 10 ends might just last a little too long. The pitch clock for MLB, everyone's trying to kind of keep that, we all have very short attention spans. I'm sure many of my colleagues won't watch this entire interview kind of thing because, so it depends on how long you can lock in and keep those people focused. And so I think you sort of adjust as you go. On the father side, probably very similar as far as short attention spans and sequences. Plus, I guess going back and trying to figure out the next time, like if you have a bad sequence in a game, you're like, okay, next time we do this, let's try this differently. Like that didn't work out well. We thought it was going to, but how do we adjust? I'd like to think the same thing as fatherhood. There's plenty of times both my son and my daughter, I've gone back, whether it's the next day or a couple hours later. Okay, I didn't react well in that. I didn't handle that well. Let's redo this. Let's have a do-over. When you said this, I probably should have said this, or I wish I would have said this differently, and vice versa. So, maybe I hadn't considered it, but maybe there's a parallel there as well, where it's, sequences, and you kind of, hopefully you get more wins than losses. I guess at some point we'll know for sure. But so far I like my odds on both sides of it, production and fatherhood.
When it comes to production and storytelling and emotions, what are the type of emotions that draw you in the most as a producer when it comes to putting something out there on the air, and as a consumer and a viewer as well?
Yeah. Most people that know me, I'm not, and I'm not saying I'm this with pride, but I'm more of a black and white guy than I am a warm fuzzy guy. I like kind of sometimes the X's and O's more than the, warm fuzzies, because that's my comfort zone as well as a person, probably. So, I think for the storytelling, it's a matter of kind of picking those moments. I like, as a viewer, I like being educated. Hey, I didn't know that about Bryan, or I didn't know that about this person, or I didn't know about this background. Like, that's like, I told you before we started this, your series, I love it because I've seen so many people that I've known for decades, and I learned stuff about them that I did not know about them personally. And I think that's really cool because, for us, very rarely do you have multiple producers on the same show. So when I see somebody and learn something about them, that, I mean, I've sat with these folks several times and had meals or done shows or sat in seminars and that sort of thing. But sometimes you don't get that kind of that behind the scenes look or that under the hood look at them. So, for me, I like being educated, and it gives you, because I feel like it gives you maybe a little more context on why people are the way they are as well. So I guess for me, that's like, for NASCAR, I like pit reporters more than features, because pit reporters are like right there giving you inside stuff of what's happening next in the decisions behind it, as opposed to, when this guy was 6, he got a new bike. That's just me, though. That said, it might also be because I'm much better at the X's and O's than I am the features. Like the feature units, for Olympics and places like NASCAR, they're unbelievable storytellers. I don't think that's my wheelhouse. So maybe I'm more comfortable with the X's and O's.
What would it take, CJ, to break down the shell that protects your warm and fuzziness?
Like, which alcohol, or what do you?
to
I'm a Bloody
get
Mary
you
guy.
to get you to get to that place that
Yeah, I'm much more. For years I was carrying around a sonogram pictures of my daughter when she was first, when we were first had our first child, and I almost got teary eyed just now. So that it doesn't take much, depending on what the topic is. With sports, I'm passionate about sports because, I think there are jobs and careers. A job is kind of a means to an end, right? Like, I do this because I want to go windsurfing on the weekend.
yeah.
Career, I think, is something you pour yourself into because you want to get better at it and you believe in it. And I've considered production a career. I mean, I care about the details because, I think that's, years ago I was told that's kind of where the devil lies, right? So, to break my shell, I could talk anybody's ear off about my family, and I could spend just as many hours talking about production and my beliefs in it. So it probably doesn't take a lot. I don't know if that cracks the shell. Cracking the shell probably is, like I said, it's the family gets me a little choked up more than the career. But like, I still get goosebumps. There are certain sports moments that like the Tyree helmet catch. I mean, my kids were younger. I was on the couch, kind of whisper screaming by myself in a house, trying to not wake them. So there's moments like that, I mean, miracle. Like when I get to watch that movie of the reenactment and everything else, and telling with my son, he's like, that's an incredible moment there. The pandemic gave me a chance to revisit the Bulls with him, Last Dance, like those things. Like, still, I just got goosebumps just talking about it. So I don't know if that triggers everybody the same, but for me, those are the kind of the moments, especially when I can connect them then to family. Like, connecting sporting events to family even kind of doubles that.
How do your kids, CJ, show you, demonstrate to you, whether that's with their words or their actions, that they believe in you and all that you're doing?
Man, you're hard hitting. My daughter is not the biggest sports fan. What she does for me is she will ask me for my birthday or Christmas, let's go to an activity, which means a lot to me. And unfortunately, timing wise, like I think, I can't remember what it was. I think it was my birthday. She was wanting to look at when the Mets are at the Nationals and us go up there together. She was involved in rowing. I was her soccer coach when she was just a little tyke. Quickly kind of outgrew that. This just wasn't her thing. I didn't know much about crew, so I learned a lot because she was involved in it. She was a coxswain. Learned a lot about that. So that's what she does. My son it's probably a little bit easier because he's, for good or for bad, more like me. So I unfortunately have given him the Mets. I've given him the Giants, though this past year was a lot of fun. So like my son, the first NFL game he even went to was Giants at Tampa. I was doing some work for Iron Man, so I was down there, and it ended up being Daniel Jones's first start, and he ran the end zone right at us, and we won the game because Tampa Bay kicker stunk. And then I took him for his birthday. We went to New Orleans last year, or 2 seasons ago, and Giants had no business winning, and they won in overtime. And we like Saquon ran like right in the end zone that we were at. It's like sometimes you just get lucky. I can't produce those moments clearly. So that's a little bit easier. But it's both meaningful in different ways, because I know it's not my daughter's wheelhouse either. So she makes it a point to say, hey, we just went to for Christmas. I don't want anything, and that drives my family crazy that I don't just have a list. So they got together, and the four of us went to Drive Shack down here in Raleigh. And I mean, activity to me is, I'd rather have the presence than the presence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's, and I asked them to write a letter. They hate that. That's the worst. My son placates me and does it once in a while. My daughter just kind of gives me a big thumbs up and a hug, which is okay as well.
CJ Bottitta is with me. He is sports production veteran. I'm Bryan Fenley with different outlets. I want to leave you with this last question, CJ.
Okay.
You talked about going to sporting events with your kids, or watching them as a proud parent or coach, or taking your son to a football game. Having your son, let's just go down that road for a second. Having your son sit next to you and experience that game with you, what is that like?
It's more like a friendship than a father-son. When you start, again, he's 19 now. So, when you start understanding the Tampa game I told you about, a high school buddy of mine and his sister who lived in the area also went to that game. So it's an opportunity to basically, my son knows a bunch of my high school buddies and a couple of my college buddies, which is kind of cool. That I feel like I'm still pretty close with my high school buddies and college buddies, and B, that my son knows them as peers as far as sports fans. We went to Pittsburgh a couple of years ago to catch a Mets series, and a college buddy of mine was in town because his daughter goes to Pitt. So like, they just get along. It's not, then God help me, they're not sharing the stories what we have of each other, but it's pretty comfortable. We went, another lark is, I was doing some work in San Diego last June, and for his first high school graduation, he came with me, and it was Mets at Padres. Yeah, and Escobar hit for the cycle, and we were there at that game, and we were like going nuts. So, and I'm lucky enough to know the Mets sideline reporter who does a fantastic job, Steve Gelbs, and I worked in Olympics years ago. So he was there. So he came up in the stands, and the three of us were just chatting about, the Mets. So that stuff I get a little bit of points too, because like my son is seeing somebody that's on TV, and now we're talking to him. So that's kind of cool. But more importantly, it's just three people hanging out, talking about something they like. There's just a connection there that's kind of easy. So it's pretty comfortable. It's pretty cool. And then I have to apologize for making him a Mets fan because we have a lot of relatives that are Yankees fans. They have a few more titles than we do. But at least, like I said, at least he's understanding humility.
There's something about the underdog, and you could argue the Mets, obviously in relation to the Yankees, are the underdog. But when the underdog wins, it's that much more rewarding and fulfilling. Your story has been that much more rewarding and fulfilling. Not that you are an underdog, but the fact is you have created those comfortable connections with your family, as you were just talking about, and that has obviously trickled in to the work and all that you do. CJ Bottitta, I'm Bryan Fenley. This was a blast, man. Thanks for doing this.
You're always great at this, Bryan. I really appreciate it.